I zipped him up. We thought it was funny, and we're joking about how he was, I guess, small enough to fit inside of the suitcase.
Were you trying to kill him?
Never.
Did you want to kill him?
I did not.
Did you do anything to help him escape from the predicament that you zipped him up in?
No.
They were just playing hide and seek. It was all fun and games until it wasn't. Alleged suitcase killer Sarah Boone took the stand Tuesday to tell jurors what she says happened the night she reportedly zipped her boyfriend into a suitcase and left him there to die. Boone testified it was all just a joke, so how did things take such a horrific turn? We're going to take a look back at the top moments from Sarah Boone's testimony. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey guys, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. Recent studies have uncovered a link between Depo-Provera, aka the Depo shot, and an increased risk of brain tumors. Lawsuits are being filed against Pfizer, the manufacturer of Depo-Provera, alleging that they failed to warn patients and doctors about this risk and instead rushed the drug to market while downplaying the adverse event reports. So if you've been diagnosed with a brain tumor or you're experiencing symptoms like headaches, vision problems, seizures, or other neurological issues, you may qualify for compensation. Wright and Schulte, one of our legal sponsors, is a national firm helping those injured to ensure their claims are thoroughly presented. Just visit deposhotclaims.com/sidebar to answer less than 10 questions and check your eligibility to file a claim. Let's talk about day 3 of the highly anticipated murder trial of Sarah Boone. It was on this day that jurors were able to hear from, of all people, the defendant herself, as Sarah Boone attempted to explain the chaotic events leading up to the death of her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr. Now, here's what we know. In February 2020, Boone was arrested at her home in Winter Park, Florida, near Orlando. Now, prosecutors charged her with second-degree murder after she allegedly forgot that George was zipped up inside of a small piece of luggage where he suffocated. Investigators found videos taken on Boone's cell phone that showed George begging to be let out while Boone seems to laugh and calls him out for apparently cheating on her. And since her arrest, Boone has gone viral, not only for the bizarre and insidious details revealed in the buildup to this trial and Jorge Torres' death, but also she's apparently very difficult to work with. Boone had various attorneys bow out due to conflicts of interest. Then others asked to be removed because working with Boone was basically impossible. The judge decided that she actually forfeited her right to counsel and that she would have to represent herself at trial, whether she wanted to or not. But her current counsel swooped in at the 11th hour to represent her. Now, Sarah Boone has claimed a battered woman's defense, a battered person's defense. And it does appear that she and Jorge Torres were in an abusive relationship. And essentially, this defense is a way to justify self-defense, the use of deadly force, if you were subjected to repeated abuse. Now, to be clear, domestic violence charges had been filed between the two previously, and photos of Boone's injuries, allegedly at the hands of George, were shown in court to the jury. And Boone herself had a chance to tell her side of the story on Tuesday when she took the stand. Now, she described how she and George had been drinking heavily for most of the day in question, that they had been spending some time at home since they didn't have money to really go out. She said that they had been playing puzzles, they were doing some art projects, and then she says that George wanted to play a game of hide and seek. And shortly after, that is when things took a very deadly turn. So from here, I'm going to let you hear it from the defendant herself, Sarah Boone. Take a listen.
I don't even think I made it all the way down the stairwell because I was just looking for him as soon as I could to hopefully go upstairs as soon as we could. And I looked over and I saw him settling himself in the suitcase.
What did you do?
In my head, I said, oh man, we're obviously not going to be going to sleep anytime soon.
When you got up to him, did he see you?
Yes.
All right. Tell us what happened.
I zipped him up. We thought it was funny, and we're joking about how he was, I guess, small enough to fit inside of the suitcase.
All right, so what happened then?
From there, it was just we were laughing about it, and it was just strange that he was small enough to fit in there, and then I kind of moved it around a little bit with him in the suitcase still. It was still funny that he was still in the suitcase. Just, I think he and I were just kind of couldn't believe that he could fit in the suitcase.
Did you eventually close the top?
Yes, in order for, well, the top was already closed. As he was settling himself in there, that's how I knew he was in there, was because the top was kind of flopping a little bit.
Okay. So he had gotten in there to hide, and he pulled the top
Yes,
on top of it. But you could tell he was in there.
yes,
You saw him right away.
yes,
All right. So at some point, did you zip him up? Did
yes.
you? And what was he saying or doing when you were zipping him up?
We just thought it was funny.
Were you both laughing?
Yes,
And so you zipped him up. Were y'all still laughing once you zipped him up?
yes,
So again, according to Sarah Boone, this was one big joke. Now, they had consumed a ton of alcohol that day, and as the night wore on, she says it was George who started this hide-and-seek game, and that he was the one who voluntarily crawled into the suitcase. But Boone admits that she's the one who actually zipped him up inside. But again, according to Sarah Boone, this was all just part of the fun. So why was he struggling inside the suitcase? Well, remember, at the center of this case is this 2-minute video where George is trapped inside of that suitcase, very clearly heard saying he cannot breathe, begging for Boone to let him out. But according to Boone, George was violent with her, that he was violent with her on more than one occasion, and especially when he was intoxicated. So keeping him confined, she says, gave her a chance to feel safe from him. Take a listen.
That's when I went over and decided to videotape to just see the, I guess, the jest in it, for him to understand that right now I feel safe, and right now I have the ability to actually speak to you in a manner that normally I would not have the ability to do.
And you were intoxicated,
Yes.
and you would agree that you said some things you should not have.
Yes.
Right? But you realized he could not get out and get at you. Is that fair?
At that moment, yes.
So it goes on for about 10 minutes.
Yes.
You heard it here today, did you not?
Yes.
You heard his voice as he was speaking from the suitcase.
Yes.
That was his voice on the video and audio.
Yes.
And you heard your voice on the video and audio.
Yes.
That was your voice.
Yes.
All those things said by the man were said by George in that 2-minute video.
Correct.
All the words said by the female were said by you in that 2-minute video.
Correct.
Were you intending on showing him the video the next day?
Yes.
At the time, or the next day, is it fair to say you don't even remember a videotape?
I do not.
So, from what you can tell from watching it, did that refresh your memory about that event?
I did.
Why did you say all that?
I want you all to know that the majority of the time, am always afraid and always scared.
All right, well, I understand that. Okay, I understand that. But would it be fair to say that you had some anger at that point?
I did.
Would it be fair to say that you wanted to tell him off to some degree?
I just wanted, yes, for him to have a better understanding, which was the whole point of the videos and documentation prior.
And you could tell that he was uncomfortable.
I'm guessing.
And did you want him to feel some uncomfort?
I did.
Okay.
So, in other words, she's telling the jury that this video was her way to talk to George, to get him to listen to her. But also, in that video, she can be heard seemingly mocking George and reminding him of times where she says he beat her up. Now, what is not on that video, she says, is George threatening to hurt her if he gets out of the suitcase.
It got very heated very quickly, and he continued to push on the suitcase. And my fear was that he was going to break out of the suitcase, knowing that it was a broken suitcase. And his hand started to come through. His hand started to come through this way. And so I shook the suitcase. Trying to get his hand to go back in, shaking it, and telling him that, please stop doing this. Please stop doing this to me. Please stop doing this to me.
So his hand actually got out of the suitcase,
Yes.
and you went to the suitcase
Yes.
and shook it.
Yes.
Did that force his hand to go back in?
No.
So you're shaking it. Were you shaking it to try to get the suitcase, his hand back in?
Yes.
How long did you shake it?
I don't know.
But his hand was still out.
Yes.
Was he trying to get out?
Forcefully, yes.
Was he angry at you?
Yes.
Were you in fear?
Always.
If he would have gotten out of the suitcase, what would he have done to you?
Like he used to tell me, he probably would have made me unrecognizable, or I would have lost my life.
Okay, that testimony is key to Sarah Boone's defense. Remember, she's claiming self-defense, that her life was in imminent danger if George got out of that suitcase. And all of this fear stems from a history of alleged past abuse. So we're at the point where George is doing anything he can to get out of this suitcase, even sticking his hand through, but Boone claims she is deathly afraid and is not going to let him out.
For the split-second reaction that I had, I happened to see that, and I grabbed the baseball bat and was trying to poke his hand to go back in, to please don't break through, please. So I hit his hand.
And you said you poked him with it?
Yes, I kind of pushed, like I held it with the skinny part here, and then
So the grip here,
prodded at it, yes.
you grabbed it with both hands here,
Yes,
and then the barrel of the bat, the big part of the bat is here.
correct.
And you thrusted it into the different areas of the suitcase?
I started with his hand, and his hand, he was still trying to get out. He was still trying to do that. So I started to push on the suitcase around it, hoping to have his hand retract and go back inside.
You made those injuries.
I did,
We've seen the photographs.
yes,
We see the bruising. Is that from that bat?
yes.
Eventually, did his hand go back inside from you doing?
Yes, finally, he had subsided and retracted his hand.
So in your mind, did you prevent him from attacking you?
Absolutely.
Did you believe that he could breathe in there?
Yes.
Did you ever believe he could die in there?
No. At all.
Were you trying to kill him?
Never.
Did you want to kill him?
I did not.
Let's set the stage one more time here. To be clear, Sarah Boone is admitting to not only zipping up George in the suitcase, but also essentially shoving him inside of it. First by shaking the suitcase, and then even with a baseball bat. So eventually the tense moment dies down and George stops trying to escape, but she still doesn't let him out. She just walks away, heads upstairs. You might be wondering, why didn't Sarah Boone just call the police at this point if she was truly this afraid of Jorge Torres? After all, George is zipped up in the suitcase. He can't hurt her from inside. Well, it turns out she did make a phone call, but it wasn't to the police. It was to her ex-husband. And that's all she says she remembers before going to sleep, leaving Jorge Torres inside of that suitcase where he eventually died. So what was her reaction when she found him the next day?
How did you feel when you saw the suitcase?
I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that before.
Describe it to the jury.
I guess it was, I was aghast, and I just can't describe the feeling.
Bless you.
It was terror to
Bless you.
a certain degree.
I'm sorry, say that again now.
It was terror to a certain degree. I just can't describe it in words, the feeling of remembering. And then he was still in there.
So what did you do?
I immediately unzipped the suitcase, and I was screaming, "George, George, George," and I was shaking him, and I pulled him out, and I stretched him out flat, and then I began instantly trying to do CPR, and then was trying to look for a pulse or a breath or just anything, and was just screaming his name over and over and over again, and come on, George, and I continued CPR, and I continued CPR, and he was gurgling, and...
What color was he?
What color was he?
Yes.
He was purple.
It's at this point that Boone calls her ex-husband again, who then tells her, call 911, and then George is declared dead. Now, Boone admits on the stand that she lied to police, and she gives more details that might support her battered person syndrome.
I lied to the police, basically everyone, because I was extremely fearful of being arrested. I made the first attempt of me calling 911 by telling them what happened, and I thought they were going to help me, but instead I was arrested for calling 911.
So you made the decision to lie.
I did.
Did you stay with that lie?
I did.
Are you telling the truth today?
I am.
Now let me take you back to this incident. Is it fair to say that when Jorge Torres is sober, he commits no violence against you?
No.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that every time that he's intoxicated, or every time that you're hit by him or harmed by him, it's when he's intoxicated?
Yes.
As a result, when he's drinking, does it change your outlook?
Yes.
Could you explain that to the jury?
I'm always fearful, paranoia.
Why?
Because I try to protect and defend myself for fear something happens at the last ultimate second.
But you're always that way, fearful. Is it because of these prior incidences?
Absolutely.
And by the way, when we discuss battered person syndrome, that usually can be characterized by the psychological effects that result from living with intimate partner violence. According to experts, this can cause a person to have flashbacks of traumatic events, an increased sense of a fight or flight response to perceived danger, even causing someone to take action to eliminate a potential threat. So what exactly are these prior incidents that Boone testified to? Well, I have to tell you, her descriptions are really brutal. And she says that they always occurred when George had been drinking. And remember, Boone testified that on the day in question, George was drinking. She knew this meant that he could harm her. And George actually had been arrested for past instances of domestic violence. The jury, even as I mentioned, got to see pictures of just how horrific this past alleged abuse really was, and they heard countless stories of this, including an incident where George apparently stabbed Boone with a butcher knife.
Ms. Boone, is that you?
Yes.
Are those injuries to your arm?
Yes.
Were they caused by Jorge Torres?
Yes.
And during the same incident, is this you?
Yes.
Is that an injury or bruise to your ribcage area?
Yes.
You had to go to the hospital as a result of these injuries to your thigh?
Yes. It was
Okay.
extremely painful.
Is that a depiction of the murder?
Yes.
Is that your thought?
It's my thought, yes.
And your name?
Yes. So, George stabbed me in my leg. I almost bled to death.
All right, well, let's go back and explain what led up to that.
I thought it would be nice to cook a nice steak dinner. We don't have two nickels to rub together, so I thought it would be special to make a steak dinner and baked potato and go above the normal whatever's left over in the refrigerator. And then he came upstairs and saw that I had made the steak dinner, and I don't know how to describe how drunk he was, but it definitely was not George. And then he started to pull on me and kept saying that, excuse me, that I just want to you on the steak and you on the potatoes. And I took offense to that, and I kept trying to encourage him to eat. I started to crawl off of the bed to leave, just the bedroom. And he told me again that I'm not going anywhere, and he stabbed me in my leg, and it crunched. You could hear a noise that it made, and blood just started to come out of my leg just like a fountain.
Here's a question you might be asking. We're seeing these horrifying pictures. We're hearing Sarah Boone's account of that night with the steak knife. Why didn't she just leave George?
As anyone who has ever been in love, or when you love someone, or primarily someone or something, you go above and beyond, and you tolerate and you endure and you persevere, and you try to make that person as spectacular as you possibly can, no matter the sacrifice that you may have to go through to serve someone else in a positive light, so they can be better people for themselves, and to just make them a happier person.
Okay, that was the direct examination. Direct examination, you get to tell your story, then you face cross-examination from the prosecution. And the prosecution here questioned Sarah Boone on a few different things, and they questioned her as to how much alcohol she actually drank that day. Boone testified under direct examination that she had several bottles of wine, but as the state pointed out, based on the size of the bottles, this would actually turn out to be a really significant amount of wine.
You go to Publix and you get that 1.5 liter Magnum bottle of Woodbridge Chardonnay, correct?
I'm not sure what Magnum is.
1.5 liters. Instead of the 750s, it's the double size. It's like 2 bottles of wine.
Okay, yes.
So you got a 1.5 liter, right?
Yes, it is the larger bottle.
And you got home, and you at 100 pounds and Mr. Torres at 103 pounds began drinking this wine, correct?
I'm guessing so. I'm not going to guess times.
Well, don't guess. I mean, you got home from Publix. When was your first drink?
I'm not sure. I mean, we could have continued to do whatever was left over from what we didn't do before we went to Publix.
Okay. So you may have started drinking even later, correct?
Then
12:30 when you get back from Publix?
I don't know.
Okay. Was it 1:30 or 2:30 when you began drinking?
I don't know.
All right. Was it before any of the phone calls to the brothers and his daughters?
Yes.
And so you drink what's left in the bottle of wine from the day before that's halfway labeled, correct?
At some point.
And then you drink 1.5 liters of wine, and he goes out and gets another one on his own without your permission or suggestion about 5:30, correct?
Correct.
And then you all consume that one as well, and it ends up in the trash can at the end of the night, correct?
Apparently.
Okay. At what point in the night does your memory tape stop? Because you've described that it wasn't on at 11:03 p.m. when that photograph was taken. What's the last thing you actually do remember prior to these videos being made?
I don't recall it at this point. I don't remember.
Now, these bottles were apparently magnum size. Essentially, we're talking about 2 normal bottles inside of 1 big bottle that both she and Jorge Torres, reportedly both around 100 pounds, consumed over the course of the day.
He had been angry on and off throughout the entire day.
Okay. You didn't tell us that earlier. You said it was a wonderful, fun day all day, correct?
That's because I lived.
Okay. But you did not tell us earlier today that he had been angry throughout the day.
When would I say that?
You described your entire day of doing puzzles and arts and crafts and outside by the dartboard, and you said it was a wonderful day and everything was fun until he was in the suitcase. Did you not testify to that earlier today?
I did.
Okay. My specific question between these 2 movies is, this is when he begins to get angry and trying to push his way out and to get out of the suitcase, correct?
Angry again, yes.
Okay. And he was expressing his anger in what manner? How did he say this?
At which point throughout the day?
Ma'am, you know very well that I'm talking about between these movies. Please answer my question. Between these 2 movies, how did he express his anger with you?
He told me that I was going to die.
Okay. Now this is happening after he's already told you several times he cannot breathe in the suitcase, correct?
Correct.
And he's been in there for whatever brief amount of time it took you to zip him up, and the laughter stops, and then you go over to begin to film, correct?
Yes.
And you're filming. Your purpose of filming is to kind of teach him a lesson. This is your chance to say something to him when he can't say anything back to you, correct?
No.
Then correct me.
There was no lesson to be learned. It was just I wanted him to try to understand how I felt so maybe he could progress in being a better person the next day.
So you wanted him to understand how you felt in the past, and that's not teaching a lesson?
I just wanted him to understand.
Here, it seems the state is really poking holes into Boone's self-defense argument. Boone didn't testify to any violence happening prior to this, and from her account, she and Jorge were actually enjoying each other's company that day. Where was the imminent danger? Now, towards the end of her cross-examination, Sarah Boone actually demonstrated for the jury how she zipped Jorge Torres inside of that suitcase where, again, she would ultimately leave him to suffocate and die.
Can we see how it was that the 2 zipper parts were positioned when you say that Mr. Torres was able to get his hand out? If you want me to do it, I'm fine to take your direction.
From what I remember, this is how the suitcase was. This was up here. This was not this hard either. So this was like here.
Okay.
Right here.
About right there, ma'am?
Sure.
Okay. I assume this one was much closer? It's not over there? Where did you
You asked me where I zipped it.
When you say that it was zipped shut, show us.
Are you talking about how I zipped it, or?
When you're done zipping
Like
it
a
shut
hole.
and he's inside of it, where are the zipper components?
Just tell me where it's at.
I mean, it was the corner. I mean, it's the corner was
right
cut
here?
open. I mean,
Here?
it's not. Yes,
Yes?
this one was already pre-matched, yes. From what I can remember. That's how he was coming with his hand out. It was like this from the corner part.
Okay. Thank you. Did you do anything to help him escape from the predicament that you zipped him up in?
No.
And right here at the very end of her cross-examination, jurors are left with one powerful fact. Sarah Boone did nothing to help Jorge Torres out of that suitcase. Not when he tried to escape, not when he told her he couldn't breathe. That is a big point. We expect the defense's case to continue. We are going to bring you all of the major updates out of this really high-profile Florida murder trial, and we will follow it for you here on Sidebar. That's all we have for you right now. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.